Good evening and welcome to Poland Daily, the first English news program in Poland. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee. The Gazeta Polska Club's meeting was held today in the city of Tarnowskie Góry with the participation of the Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki. The meeting touched on the subject of the 100th anniversary of the Silesian uprisings.
Z okazji 100. rocznicy wybuchu powstań śląskich.
The meeting of the Gazeta Polska clubs in the city of Tarnowskie Góry has been going on since yesterday on the occasion of the 100th anniversary of the Silesian uprisings. The Polish Minister of Finance Marian Banaś, Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki, and the editor-in-chief of the Gazeta Polska Weekly Tomasz Sakiewicz took part in this event. In his speech, Sakiewicz emphasized the importance of this region for Poland.
I podkreślił znaczenie tego regionu dla Polski.
Podkreślamy przez to.
We're stressing the importance of Silesia's Polishness today, especially in the face of some members of the opposition talking about Silesia's so-called autonomy. We all know too well that it's not about any false autonomy, but loosening the ties between the region so that foreign parties could introduce their influence. Nothing good can come out of something like this.
Zupełnie inny imperializm, inna myśl.
Tak samo my dzisiaj, tak jak nasi przodkowie, wielcy przodkowie.
Today we're facing a choice, just like our great ancestors, in example Korfanty Grzebniok and all those who made Silesia Polish again. We're living in much easier times than they did, but we have to make a great decision as well. We're facing historical elections too. I'm certain that these autumn parliamentary elections will shape Poland for decades to come.
Stoimy przed wyborami.
Ideą jest to, żeby się integrować.
The idea is to unite, to talk, and most of all to have one goal, Poland's well-being. This meeting focused on important events that took place 100 years ago, the Silesian uprisings.
Która tutaj mamy przyjemność przeżywać w Tarnowskich Górach.
The convention of the Law and Justice Party was held today in the city of Bydgoszcz and Turyn. During the meetings, the Prime Minister of Poland presented the list of candidates running for the upcoming Polish parliamentary elections scheduled for this fall.
Na setki projektów, które wdrażamy, jakiś nam nie wyjdzie.
It is completely normal that some of the projects won't work out. There are thousands of people engaged in different projects, so it's completely normal that sometimes someone can make a mistake. But what's more important is the fact that we can admit when we make a mistake. When it comes to making a judgment of our work, we appeal for reasonableness, restraint, prudence and justice. This is very important to make the right choice in a few weeks, because we'll be voting. We have to decide whether all the changes that we've made were good or not. These changes didn't influence the public finances, which the European Commission and the foreign media confirmed. They say about the Polish little economic miracle. This is going to be the first time that Polish economy will catch up with the West's, and this is our program. We want to catch up to Western countries' economy, and we will make it.
Jednoczesnym utrzymaniu w ryzach finansów publicznych.
The leftist United Left Alliance, or Sojusz Lewicy Demokratycznej, will be running under the slogan, "It is the future that connects us." This year, the electoral list of the post-communist party will feature progressive left politicians from two parties, Wiśnia or Spring and Razem or Together. During the campaign, they made promise of building 1 million additional apartments, legalizing abortions, banning of religion from schools, and raising the monthly minimum wage to 2,600 Polish zlotys, roughly 650 euros.
The convention was abruptly stopped during the first speech due to a fire alarm which turned out to be false after a few minutes. The chairman of post-communist United Left Alliance, Włodzimierz Czarzasty, launched attacks on the ruling party for changes in the justice system. Robert Biedroń, the openly gay member of the European Parliament and the leader of the Spring Party, spoke about relaxing the abortion law and allowing the termination of unborn babies up to 12 weeks of development. Neo-Marxist Adrian Zandberg of Partia Razem, or Together Party, promised the construction of 1 million apartments, raising the minimum wage, and virtually free healthcare to all eligible citizens.
The Polish video game studio Pixelated Milk announced the production of their latest project, Warsaw. The game will be a strategy RPG taking place in the 1944 Warsaw Uprising, with mechanics similar to Red Hook Studios' Darkness Dungeon. The premiere will be taking place on September 4th on PC, PlayStation 4, and Nintendo Switch. The game has already gathered a lot of interest internationally due to its unique setting and art style.
The turn-based strategy RPG Warsaw will allow players to control Polish insurgents during one of the biggest resistance struggles against the Germans during the Second World War, the Warsaw Uprising. The game will showcase a variety of historical weapons used during the 63 days of the Polish Rising, ranging from submachine guns, pistols and even flamethrowers, while featuring in-depth characters, each having their own unique set of skills. The Pixelated Milk's production production bears its similarities to another tactical RPG, Darkest Dungeon, in terms of both art style and game mechanics, although its setting is definitely unusual. Columnists whom we asked about the game told us they have no doubts that it's a great educational initiative for young people all around the world.
Powstanie warszawskie wkroczyło do popkultury już.
The Warsaw Uprising found its place in popular culture several years ago, and the interest in this heroic struggle is only rising. We know that historical consciousness among young people is usually growing on two planes. One when someone is interested in the details, and the other when someone has only basic knowledge of past events. Video games are a great medium to awake the first interest.
Dobra właśnie po to, żeby budzić takie pierwsze zainteresowanie.
The game will be out on PC, PlayStation 4 and Nintendo Switch in both Polish and English versions. The graphics were painted by hand. Warsaw's producer Krzysztof Papliński says he wanted to show the phenomenon of the Warsaw Uprising to gamers all around the world.
Powstanie warszawskie to wydarzenie, które miało...
The Warsaw Uprising was an event that influenced not only the capital but the entire country. However, we knew it's not really known abroad, which is why we decided to create an engaging game in this setting. The graphics were painted by hand by very talented artists.
Usłyszymy w grze także język mówiony i będzie to polski i niemiecki.
Warsaw has promised to be internationally successful with around 400 mentions of the game in foreign media already.
That's it for today. See you next time on Poland Daily. But stay tuned for the Poland Daily Weather Report, followed by the Poland Daily Business section.
Welcome to Poland Daily Weather. Let's see the forecast for tonight. Across Poland, sky will be cloudless. More clouds will appear over Rzeszów. In all regions we are expecting little higher temperatures. A pleasant 17 degrees we will see in Gdańsk. In central Poland, temperature will range from 14 to 15 degrees in Warsaw. The coldest place that night will be the northeast with 30 degrees. The pressure will drop. Let's see the forecast for tomorrow. In most regions we may expect plenty of sunlight. Little rainfalls are expected on the south. Temperature ranging from 23 degrees in Olsztyn to 26 degrees in western Poland. Let's check the weather for the next days. On Monday, storm will appear along the Baltic coast and on the south. In other regions we may expect loads of sun. On Thursday, more sunlight will appear in central Poland and on the northeast. Temperature will rise to 33 degrees. On Wednesday, rain and storm are expected over the south. In the rest of the country we will see pleasant sunny weather. Thank you for watching and goodbye.
Poland Daily Business Edition. End of this month will mark the visit of United States President Donald Trump in Poland. He will spend here almost 3 days. The main part of the celebration will be the September 1st, which marks the beginning of the Second World War, the 80th anniversary of this tragic event. The person who will not be in Warsaw is French President Emmanuel Macron, who couldn't find the time for such celebration, but he found the time to speak to Vladimir Putin in French resort. Very interesting questions. We will talk about the Polish-American interest with Jerzy Bielewicz, a financial analyst. Sir, welcome to the show.
Good evening.
So let us start from this Trump visit and what he possibly can say to Poles and to the world.
It would be a very, very important message. We can predict what is on the agenda of President Donald Trump. It's not a secret. First of all, he's unhappy with Germany's spending on defense. And he will probably... let's start from the beginning. And the beginning is that this anniversary of breakout of Second World War, and Germany's attack on Poland. But we have to say that just 2 weeks later, Russia, Bolshevik Russia, Soviet Russia attacked Poland as well. And there was a pact, Ribbentrop-Molotov, between those two countries, which enable attack on Poland from both sides, and actually enable Holocaust in consecutive years.
We may say that without of reassurance that Russia will attack Poland, Hitler wouldn't dare to get his armies across the border.
And here you are, President Trump speaking. It would be probably one of the most important speeches of President Trump's presidency. And there would be a German Chancellor Angela Merkel present, and she would probably address part of his speech to her, urging Germany to spend more on defense. He might even say something about Nord Stream project, that here you are, you cooperate with Russia, and here I am in Poland, pointing out that this cooperation was not good throughout history. And
Radosław Sikorski, a person who is very critical to the Law and Justice government. He was foreign affairs minister for 8 years during the Platforma Obywatelska or Civic Platform rule. Before he was again a person connected to the Law and Justice, and while he was connected to Law and Justice, he called this Nord Stream pipeline the Ribbentrop-Molotov gas connection.
Yeah, exactly. So here you are. The stage is for President Trump to set a new geopolitical order in this region, and probably Poland would be the key.
Will he mention the Polish claim to pay war damages to Germany? Because that's what we want. We want about 1 trillion euro. That's about 900 billion euros for the damages caused by German army, police, and rules on Polish soil.
I wish he would support Polish claims, and I wish Polish government would put on the table this subject, because if you are able to be aggressive and to destroy countries and kill people and pay no price, it encourages you to similar behavior, and Russia is a good example of this kind of behavior, fighting war with Ukraine.
After fighting war with Georgia and unpunished aggression. The German is a key here, and the Germans are being pushed by United States to first of all stay in the Western camp, so to speak. Second, lower their interest level of engagement in Russia. And third, building up or the Germans had to spend 2% of their budget on defense, because that's a NATO standard. The German ministers sign up to this bill, yet they refuse to do that. And maybe the claim that American troops that are stationing in Germany will be moved to Poland was just another part of this kind of negotiations.
I don't think that this move is it's a sure thing, I think, because of the political situation in Germany. The Green movement is very strong in Germany, and there are quite a few parties, Socialist Party, for example, with Schroeder, the former head, who is right now very close to Russian interests. who are against increase in defense spending. So German politics is, I would say, not in a politicians are not in good position to increase defense spending because they would lose electorate, they would lose voters. So in time, I think the US troops would be moved to Poland, and it's only a matter of time.
We already see the military build-up in Poland. Only a few days ago, the new airstrip in Łask was operational, and that's a top-class military airstrip in the world.
Poland is right now investment side, both on military facilities as Łask, as you said, huge technology transfer. If we talk about military, one of the military zone would be upgraded to license U.S. troops and Polish troops, in fact. So all this high-tech technology would be moved to these sites in order for the U.S. Army to operate, to
from the business side, it increases the security of the FDI in our country.
Exactly, and by gaining this stability, and there would be much more investment, private investment in Poland. And that's one story. And at the same time, the U.S. Army presence, it's very good for local economy because of investment, because those soldiers have to spend
jobs of the local fundings and so on and so on. So there is lots of positive influences.
So there was a funny change in the German politics. If you follow the German press, they kind of like the U.S. soldiers on their soil right now, because if they move, Germany would suffer economically.
Lose revenue on the services. So thank you very much for this brief conversation. And that was it for tonight's Poland Daily Business.
Welcome back to Poland Daily Weather. Let's see the forecast for tomorrow. In the most regions we may expect plenty of sunlight. Little rainfalls are expected on the south. Temperatures ranging from 23 degrees in Olsztyn to 26 degrees in western Poland. Let's take a look at the forecast for our continent. Alternating rain and sun will dominate in Central Europe, and there we will see about 22 and 28 degrees. In British Islands, temperature will range from 21 to 32 degrees. The hottest temperature will be in Athens, 36. Thank you for watching and goodbye.
Good day, everyone. My name is Maria Kądzielska, and this is Poland Daily Culture. Today we are going to talk about the most expensive Polish film production after City 44, the movie called The Legions. It is the first fiction film about Polish legions formed during World War I. We have in studio with us Maciej Pawlicki.
Hello.
Thank you for coming.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
But it is hard to talk about the film without watching it, so let's see a trailer. You worked with many horses and you needed to store them somewhere as kind of, after all, you're responsible for them since they are your actors and qualified actors. How did you do it?
Well, we built like a huge camp, huge horse stable camp, and there were for 70 horses for like 2 weeks. First they were trained, they were used to run on that field, and then I would say very good conditions. But it was also a big effort, a production effort, and that was a standard for us to when we, for instance, when we were shooting in Cieszyn, which was pretending to be a different town, but we shot it in Cieszyn.
So you have to bring back historical realities as well. As I understand, is a huge amount of work with costumes, but with also with decorations. How did you work on that?
Well, we had to change some. Of course, we were choosing good locations, like Tokarnia, where we have all these old mansions and huts, and we found some very picturesque places in Poland, but anyway, they had to be adapted. And for instance, in Cieszyn, we were shooting a town scene in downtown Cieszyn. So we had to change all the displays and all the signs, all the names of the stores all around the market into Russian. And into the old style. So people really were very surprised, because Cieszyn was never Russian. And why Russian names around? But they said because all these gardens, beer gardens, were removed for the time being from the market. And they said, it's so beautiful now. Let's leave it that way.
In the old style with Russian names.
Well, maybe not Russian names, but the style. The style was really that people liked a lot. And I think the actors had that feeling that we are. That was Bartek Gelner was saying the other day that he was in the production, that he had a feeling that was really taking care of reality, of good production quality in every aspect, in costumes, on the set, and even everything that was visible. So I think people will, I hope, will feel that atmosphere as well.
I'm actually personally interested in when you shoot battles in summer and winter, then the uniforms have to be different.
Of course.
And how were made those uniforms in those times, during the winter, so they wouldn't freeze to death, those soldiers? And were they wearing coats, how it looked like? And did your actors have problems also with weather circumstances?
Well, these coats were very warm ones, because it was a real wool. And sometimes they were complaining wearing them in the summer, because it was really hot for them to wear them in the temperature of 30 degrees. But in the winter it was okay, because all these uniforms had so many, I would say, they were designed the way to make it for the soldiers to feel safer, to feel to be protected from not only temperature, but also effects of water, or rain, or snow, of freezing. So our actors had that experience, that as these costumes, 100 years old, sometimes were better responding to the weather realities and war realities than their own uniforms now.
So there is a message that real quality textures are still worth having.
Absolutely.
And it's better to buy a real wool than an artificial one. You had all those details and history details, and how did you restore the uniforms in the case that, and what kind of uniforms Polish legions were? Because it's a good question. They were fighting on the Austrian side, but did they have Polish uniforms?
Well, it was changing, because in the beginning some of them were coming from were part of the Austrian army. So, for instance, the material was given by some regulations of the Austrian army, but some were preparing uniforms for themselves, and that's why the colors are a bit different, because there was a big discussion what the colors should be.
Soldiers were preparing uniforms for themselves?
Yes, we have stories. For instance, a very talented musician who got the money from his father to buy himself a tuxedo, And he did get the tuxedo, but then he sold it. And this money he invested in the uniforms, selling his
so those people were actually putting themselves in a danger to die on the battlefield, and they were paying for themselves for the uniforms.
Absolutely.
It's a huge sacrifice, which
it was not a sacrifice. It was for them. It was like their very the most important goal to live in the independent Poland, because they thought the girls as well. They thought that they can fulfill their dreams, their ambitions in the independent Poland, not in Russia, not in Austria, but in Poland. They were hoping that Poland will be organized that way, that for them it will be really perfect, their own state, their own country. So that's why they were praying for the war. They were praying to have a chance to fight for Poland, which is difficult to understand for us now, but maybe if they wouldn't do that, we wouldn't be speaking
we have to not English here.
Polish and English, we would be speaking Russian probably, or German right now.
That might be possible. So we forget what a huge struggle it was for Polish legions and for Poles those times to fight for this independence. And its Polish legions are not only associated with fantasy and with great honor, but with a struggle of an everyday circumstances such as uniforms as well.
Blood, sweat and tears.
Blood, sweat. So Polish legions are not only fantasy, but it's also blood, sweat and tears. And I hope the viewers, while watching the film Polish Legions, will also remember about it. And this film will bring those realities and the memory of those people fighting for Polish independence.
I'm here today in the Saxon Gardens at the heart of Warsaw. Since 1727, a public garden, one of the first in Europe. But it started life as something more, the garden of a palace built by the first Saxon king of Poland, Augustus II. A member of the Wettin dynasty from Saxony became kings of Poland. Why were they here? What were they doing? Why did they build this palace? And what is more, what is the Saxon Axis? An exercise in urban planning. Join me in Poland Daily History today when we find out more. So Piotr, here we are in a building we can actually see today, and that's more or less how it looks today, the Lubomirski Palace, which, if we think of the Axis, was just outside just the other side of the Iron Gate.
Yeah.
Which probably we can see, we can recall the Canaletto painting, it was just outside the gate.
In
its more Baroque style.
Style, yeah. Because originally that was a palace from mid-17th century, which was still in late Baroque style. And it was paralleled to the Axis. Yeah, so if you went out from the garden through the Iron Gate, you could see
it on your right-hand side. Yes,
the right-hand side, exactly. So that was the Lubomirski Palace, which was going next to the axis, and if you go further, you will reach eventually the barracks of the soldiers, Saxon soldiers. Yeah.
And again, we see the marvelous colonnades.
Yeah. So actually, they reshaped the palace. Lubomirski reshaped the palace in late 18th century in the new fashion, so the classic fashion, of course. So we have this colonnade, which is kind of talking with a colonnade
I think I'm right to say that these are Ionic capitals on the columns.
Yeah, yeah. So we
Corinthian ones we saw before. Yes.
Exactly. And here we have Ionic heads of the columns. And but it was also very monumental portico of the main palace, and in late 18th century it was recognized by the people of Warsaw as one of the most fashionable palaces, yeah, because it was up to date. Yeah, it was then recognized even better than those
it must have been marvelous in
palaces.
some ways to be around as an aristocrat in the 18th century, because whereas today people recognize fashion by changing their cars or changing their clothes, in the 18th century, if you're an aristocrat, you could recognize your fashion by just changing the facade of your building.
Yeah.
A rather grander and a rather more permanent gesture, something of course we can revel at today when we see these marvelous monumental buildings.
Especially this kind of families like Lubomirski family, which was one of the most powerful and wealthiest families in the whole kingdom.
Course, yes,
actually,
so
they could change the fashion with the changing of their palaces. Something that we can still trace on this palace is actually that we have those original Baroque curves on the main parts of the main corpus, but the ornamentation is clearly new classicist ornamentation. With this
exactly right.
imitation of the stone on the bottom level, and then the new. The next levels.
The rustication.
Rustication.
I think our architectural friends would say. And of course, very, very practical to have. You can drive your carriage in under the arches and in the rain and not get wet.
Exactly.
You're sort of rather splendid porte cochere there, but marvelous. I think, nice to have this sort of raised terrace area there, which must have been very useful for people who were living in the palace.
Yeah, but they had a great view from the, of course, so-called piano nobile, which was the first story, which was the main, the most important chambers were always on the first story of the piano. Piano nobile. So with this terrace, they can went out from the main rooms to see the view of the Iron Gate, of the saloon, great saloon, and the whole axis at this point. So that was very.
I think I'm right in saying it's actually
situation.
A remarkable survival, because under Augustus II's original plans for the axis and the buildings he wanted to build, the Lubomirski Palace would have been demolished. I think, as I read, as he was going to create this axis. It was in the wrong place and was scheduled for demolition, but he sort of ran out of money in about 1733, I think I read. So we're lucky it survived.
Yeah. That's true, and because of this, that it survived, it was so close to the axis. Actually, it was one of the best actually shown palaces in whole Warsaw. Yeah, one of the best situation of the nobles' palaces in Warsaw.
But for Augustus II, not quite how he envisaged it.
Yeah.
So if he'd had more money, it would have been bought, knocked down, and we'd have had something else. But of course, why this is particularly interesting also as a palace is that, ironically, after the destruction of the war, and when this building was repaired, renovated, they actually did move it, rotate it some 70 to 80 degrees. So ironically, it now is part of the axis.
Yeah, actually, and I think it's better to see it from the back side, actually, of this.
So we can move over and
we can move over
have a look and see how they did it.
Yeah, exactly. Let's do it.
Here we are, and we can see now at the back of the model, and we can see the marvelous work they did to rotate the building almost 90 degrees. Extraordinary.
Yeah. Yes, actually 78 degrees as I remember. And you can see even this gray parts which were original annexes, back annexes of the palace. So they rotated from this position, which was parallel to the original axis, moved actually moved in this like over 70 degrees. And so nowadays the building actually is kind of closing.
Exactly. It is at the end of the axis. Ironically, the building which Augustus II, who gave us the axis, wanted to destroy has become the end point of the axis and is perfectly square on the axis.
Yeah.
Extraordinary.
Exactly. And here we can see how they made it technically also. So they used those carved rails and they actually cut the building from its foundation and then put the whole structure on those rails, moved it to the new situation on the new foundation in another place, and they managed to do it with such a huge building. So they cut out only part of the annexes which were added to the palace, but the main carpets they moved.
Those buildings have been subsequently demolished. I think they're no longer there, but the palace is. And very much as it appears today, in fact, which is a great. When you think of what was going on, the fact that these buildings were saved and that so much effort went into saving this building, when you think of the political regime at the time, it's actually also a rather remarkable survival.
Yeah, and which is interesting. Actually, it wasn't the only building that was moved during the rebuilding process of Warsaw. There was a church of the Leszno, pre-war Leszno Street. So nowadays the Solidarności, Aleja Solidarności,
yeah, that's right.
One of the main streets in the city center, which was to make the way for the new road. Here they also wanted to close the axis and design differently the whole layout of this place actually. So and it was dividing also with this building, this historical side with a garden, and further on with Krakowskie Przedmieście and the old town, which was this historical part which was rebuilt, and behind that was built the housing estate.
A lot of the new blocks, which
like huge blocks of
which
flats.
We identify so much with this wonderful communist-inspired architecture. Yes.
Yeah. Sharp division between those. So they closed with this palace, the historical part, and behind the palace that was the beginning of this new
socialist utopia.
Yeah.
Or so they hoped or thought.
Yeah.
I'm glad they actually saved this building, which is much nicer than some of the other buildings which appear. But again, it is just as a feat of engineering. It's wonderful to see that so much can be done to save buildings if there's the will to do it.
If there's a will to do it, exactly. So they saved the building and they changed so it looks completely different also nowadays than it used to look back in times. So actually, it was also historically before World War II, it was on the edge of the so-called northern district and the trading district and the Jewish district of Warsaw. Yeah, so it was also always on the kind of a of the border of this elegant royal park, and it's more like a trade district with different trade markets around
the market
like a mansion court, like the which was one of the like the covered trade first covered.
Yes, and if you for those who are familiar with the geography, if you then go beyond Halimarowski and further west, you get to the area which became different story, which became the area of the Jewish ghetto, because which also suffered tremendous destruction. So you're right, it is in a funny sort of way, it is sort of closing of the gate in sort of historical and sort of architectural terms, and creating this new border between ancient or historic royal Warsaw and the new socialist utopia.
Yeah, so which shows also that if we talk about the urban planning, also it in 1970s, 60s, it quite often had sense also. Yeah, if we put apart a bit of this ideology, sometimes that was like really meant to make different divisions. No matter what we think about those blocks of flats from 70s, that's a completely different stories. Yeah, but it was made to close the.
Well, it does show that
axis.
it's actually somebody did have a plan, which is actually quite interesting that they had a plan. Well, and I think in architectural terms, it's actually probably quite a logical thing to have done. In fact,
yeah.
That you would have thought, okay, how can we do this? And let's just move the palace through 78 degrees. Extraordinary.
Welcome to Poland Daily Travel and our second installment of A Touch of Paradise near Warsaw. That's right, the Campinos National Park. If you like paradise near the big city, this is your place. Our ranger guide, Katarzyna Mikrut, makes us feel at home in the park. We'll be finding out some more about the wildlife. We'll take a trip to the cemetery at Palmyra. And we'll take a look at the different kind of ecosystems. Nearly 40,000 hectares of forest. It's a big park and it's a lot of fun. So come with me and Katarzyna to Campinos National Forest.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Poland Daily. We're here with Katarzyna Mikrut here in the museum in Palmyra, right in the heart of the eastern part of the forest. And here behind us we have a map. You can see from the extent of this map, I can put my arms up and not even come to touch both sides of this map. And we've been previously over in this part at Granica last week, but right now we're just staying in the eastern part of the park. Where are we particularly?
We started our journey here.
Right.
We took small road here up to here. So in fact, few kilometers.
Just to come here to
Palmyra.
To Palmyra.
Now we may really get familiar with the history of that place. If we don't have time to study books, it's enough to come here and read the plates, information boards.
Katarzyna, you also have done some work here, haven't you?
Yes, I helped with the exhibition, so I'm a cooperator of that museum.
Yeah.
I helped with some information about the different places where are graves in the park, because we've seen the cemetery, but in the park, in the area of the park, there are more or less 100 graves. So people who died during Second World War, they've been buried in the place where died. So when you are walking, when they fall, when you are walking around the forest, you may meet solitary graves.
So that leads to my next question, which is, are there a lot of undiscovered graves, perhaps, or has the park been thoroughly searched?
Rather improbable. All graves are discovered, and we, as a park service, are taking care about all graves. So you don't find any abandoned grave in the forest. But when you are walking around, you may meet quite a lot of them.
Just wandering off the trail and running through the forest. So, is it possible to get lost in the forest?
Of course.
People get lost?
People get lost almost each week. There is a problem with somebody, especially during mushroom season. But I have to underline that mushroom picking mushroom is forbidden in national park.
That's too bad, because the next thing I was going to say is let's go mushroom picking, because I love nothing more.
Remember, we are in national park. In national park, We have to leave nature like it is. You cannot.
Can I pick some flowers?
No.
No.
You don't.
Okay.
You cannot pick up any plants, and you don't touch animals. You don't feed animals.
Can I think about feeding animals?
Yes, you may think about that, but this is
you guys,
the only
you don't have
one.
control of thoughts yet.
No, and we do not know.
You're control freaks, you park rangers. It's horrible.
In fact, it's for the nature, because wild animals are not used to eat food like we are eating, so they may get sick.
Palmyra, a quiet resting place in the middle of a forest for brave souls who challenged the Nazi regime. These all-too-human faces illustrate what words alone cannot. The several thousand people who were murdered here live on in our memories through these photographs. Likewise, the brutal, inhuman intent of the Nazi invader is laid bare. Every picture tells a story. No interpretation is necessary. In this case, the truth is black and white. Palmyra, a killing field of extraordinary tragedy.
Thank you.